only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Perry Johnson Registrars webinar on root cause analysis and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager, and we're pleased to have you here today to talk about this particular topic. The webinar will last about 45 minutes in duration for the lecture portion of today's presentation. And subsequent to that, we'll open it up to questions. To ensure sound quality, all participants have been muted. So please type in any questions that you have into the chat feature. At the conclusion of the lecture format, I'll scan through the questions and Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on root cause analysis and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager at Perry Johnson Registrars. Today's presentation will last for about an hour. The first 45 minutes will be a lecture format, and we'll open it up to questions for the remaining 15 minutes or so. To ensure sound quality, all participants have been muted. So type in any questions into the chat feature, and I'll answer as many of them as possible at the conclusion of the lecture format of today's presentation. So today we're going to talk about why we're doing this. Why did we select this particular topic? We're going to start with the audit finding and break it apart into its constituent parts. We'll talk about actions taken to correct, containment corrections. We'll talk about root cause analysis, and we're going to focus on the why technique as a problem-solving tool. And then we'll talk about actions taken to prevent recurrence of an issue or corrective actions. And then we'll talk about actions taken to prevent occurrence of an issue or preventive actions. We'll then spend some time talking about verification activities. So why this particular topic? PGR wants your organization to improve. We're firm believers that there should be a strong correlation between how you do on your third-party audits and your overall quality record with your customers, your on-quality, on-time delivery performance record. If you have good audits, you should have good on-quality records, on-time delivery records with your customers. There should not be a discrepancy between audit results and how your customers are perceiving you. Unfortunately, the purpose of a management systems audit isn't to convince the auditor to write as few nonconformities as possible. It's to take systemic corrective action for each and every nonconformity that's found, and that's how we get this strong correlation. So moving on to the audit finding. Any audit finding, whether it's an internal audit finding, a finding written by a third-party auditor from a CV such as Perry Johnson, or your customers, should have three distinct parts. And those parts are the statement of nonconformity, objective evidence, and a citation of the requirement that's not being met. Audit findings that do not contain these three parts shouldn't be written by PGR auditors. In fact, I'm here to tell you today that you're completely empowered. If in a closing meeting one of our auditors tries to present to you an improperly documented finding, kick it back and ask them to revise it. You shouldn't accept these. Reject any audit findings that do not contain these three parts in the closing meeting. If your auditor happens to document an observation and opportunity for improvement, these should exist only as simple statements or recommendations. There would be no citation of a requirement not being met, because if there was a requirement to cite, it should be documented as a minor nonconformity. So let's talk about some common pitfalls with the statement of nonconformity. And one of the issues that we most typically see is that the nonconformity that's documented is not the problem, but a symptom of the problem. And this is an issue because the problem needs to be expressed as an issue with the system or the broken process. If the problem is being expressed in terms of a specific person or a single incident, we're at the symptom stage and we want to avoid that. I see both internal auditors making these mistakes as well as third-party auditors. The goal is to help the client get to the true problem, the systemic issue, or the problem-solving efforts will not be effective. Fixing symptoms does not stop the issue from recurring. Furthermore, a well-written nonconformity should stand the test of time. You should be able to put the nonconformity away in a drawer or in your electronic archives, pull it out 2, 3, 10 years later, and understand exactly what the problem was. So let's take a look at some specific examples. Here is a poorly written finding. There was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. The issue is that this is a symptom and not the true problem. It's not expressed in terms of the systemic issue or the broken process. Here we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this finding. The statement of nonconformity should read something like this. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. What is the objective evidence that we observed during the audit that allows us to make this statement? No training matrix for the first shift operator running 9954 indicating competence to run that job. And then we cite the specific requirement. Here, 9001 and 2008, we include the revision of the standard and the specific clause, 622E. We try to go out as far as possible in our citation of the clause. We don't simply cite 6.2 or 622. We take it all the way out to 622E. But you see here, we see that word system. System for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue, and we're not focusing on the single incident that we observed during our audit, the operator running job 9954. Another example of a poorly written finding. The quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, this is expressed in terms of a symptom and not the true problem or systemic issue. We're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this. The document control system is not completely effective. There's that word again, system, right in the statement of nonconformity. The evidence that allows us to make this statement, quality auditor in the blue cell, was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. And we cite the 9001-2008 requirement 423D, again taking that citation to the most specific level of detail possible. So a well-written statement of nonconformity, document control system is not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue, and we're not confusing it with the specific incident we observed or the symptoms of that problem. So some final words about the statement of nonconformity. When you review a statement of nonconformity written by your internal audit team, a PJR auditor, or even one of your customers during their audits, ask to make sure that we've distinguished between the symptoms and the real systemic issue. Does the final statement of nonconformity focus on that systemic issue? And are the data that are provided in the objective evidence section sufficient to assist in understanding the extent of the problem? Again, can you put this away in a drawer for 2, 3, 10 years, or store it in your electronic archives, be able to pull it up and know exactly the extent of the problem? PGR has an internal document we refer to as our Advisory 3 that requires all auditors to document any non-fulfillment of a requirement as such, as a nonconformity. In fact, we tell our auditors that it's inexcusable for them not to do this. There's no benefit to the auditee. If auditors don't write things up, you're not going to do the discipline problem solving you need to uncover the true root cause of the problem and implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence. And this really contributes to the diminishment of the integrity of management system certification. So it's our expectation that any nonconformity written by any PGR auditor needs to be documented as previously described. And again, clients, you're completely empowered here. Kick back the findings to the auditors in the closing meeting and tell them, you're paying for them to write good, value-added nonconformities, and they need to fix them. Okay, moving on to actions taken to correct. Typically two categories, corrections or containment actions. And these are actions taken with respect to the symptom or the incident. So they're incident-specific actions. These are very important and should be taken immediately to stop the symptoms of the problem. These actions typically take two forms. We calibrated the gauge, we controlled the uncontrolled form, or adding a layer of inspection to catch any further occurrence. However, when you add a layer of inspection to a management system, you're simply adding costs, not value. And when we get to the corrective action portion of today's presentation, we're going to learn that once a good corrective action is soundly implemented, any costly added layers of inspections should be able to be removed. It's also important that when you're reviewing a correction, that the organization includes an extent analysis in their response. The step is often missed. So in terms of an extent analysis, if we take an example of an audit finding where the auditor encountered some gauges used for monitoring and measurement that were not calibrated, the expectation is that the organization would calibrate the gauge and they would verify if any product process was verified with that gauge, and if so, is the integrity or quality of that product or process in question. That would be part of the containment, making sure that no non-conforming product gets to the customer. However, there may be other gauges in the system that are also out of calibration. And in an extent analysis, you need to check all your gauges to understand the extent of the issue, and you need to make a statement as part of your correction response. We checked all 200 gauges in our controlled system. There were 5 others that were uncontrolled. However, no product was verified with these gauges. You need to make that type of statement with that level of detail in your extent analysis. Containment actions need to be very specific to the nature of the problem. For example, considering the first example we talked about, the training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 was updated to reflect his competency to run the job unsupervised. Or all copies of the uncontrolled form the quality auditor in the blue cell was using were destroyed. Moving on to root cause analysis. The biggest pitfall with root cause analysis is that many corrective action responses will restate the incident for the root cause. This is not acceptable. Looking at our first example, it would be inappropriate to say, our organization failed to update the training matrix for the operator running job 9954. To be honest, I look at this and laugh because our auditor already told you this. Our auditor already said the training matrix wasn't updated. You're simply telling us that the root cause is you did not update it. Well, why didn't you? Similarly, the quality auditor in the blue cell didn't use the correct form to record the results of first article inspection. Again, our auditor has already told you that they were using an uncontrolled form. why is it that this was happening? So you can't simply restate the incident and twist the wording of the nonconformity statement for your root cause analysis. A second pitfall with root cause analysis is that some organizations will simply restate the containment, and this is also not appropriate. Okay, if you're sleeping, it's time to wake up. This is the single most important slide in today's presentation. Good root cause analysis answers the following question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? Again, the focus is on the system, not the incident. What in the system failed such that the problem was able to occur? It's possible that a problem may have multiple root causes, or that a problem may have several possible root causes. If you're unsure of the true root cause, all of the potential root causes require corrective action. If the problem has been found, the problem should be able to be turned on and off just like a light switch. If the problem cannot be turned on and off at will, then the root cause has probably not been found. Typically at this part in the presentation, I share an anecdote about a company that I used to work with. It was a large Tier 1 plastic injection molder, and we were supplying parts to General Motors. And there was a left-hand part and a right-hand part produced by a dual cavity tool. And we were getting a lot of issues from General Motors because we were packing the left-hand parts in the right-hand boxes and vice versa. So we were forced to pull together a problem-solving team. We had to do 100% inspection and sort on the parts and certify all the stock. We had an added layer of inspection both in our facility and at General Motors. This added cost, not value, to the process. And our problem-solving team began their analysis. And we determined that the root cause was that the particular manufacturing press where this part was manufacturing had a very narrow manufacturing cell configuration. And it was so narrow that when the auditor picked the parts that were dropped by the robot onto the conveyor, the left-hand part and the right-hand part, and went to did a quick visual inspection, went to pack them in the pack-out boxes, the left-hand pack-out box was directly in front of the operator running that particular manufacturing press in that cell. And the right-hand pack-out box was directly behind the left-hand pack-out box. Now, one would expect that the auditor would reach to the left-hand side of their body to pack the left-hand part and the right-hand side of their body to pack the right-hand part. But the manufacturing cell was so narrow that this was impossible. So they had to realize that the box directly in front of their body was for the left-hand part, and the box directly behind that left-hand pack-out box was for the right-hand parts. And this was confusing. It was not the most logical or intuitive manufacturing cell arrangement. So the operators were mispacking the parts. So we thought that was the root cause of the problem. We paid tens of thousands of dollars to reconfigure not only that manufacturing cell, but the manufacturing cell to the left and the right. We gave that particular manufacturing cell a bit more width, a bit more space, and we configured the manufacturing cell so that the left-hand pack-out box was located to the left-hand side of the operator's body, and the right-hand pack-out box was located to the right-hand side of the operator's body. Unfortunately, while the situation improved, we were still mispacking the parts. GM was finding right-hand parts in left-hand boxes, and etc. We knew, because we weren't able to turn the problem off, that we hadn't found the true root cause. So we'll come back to this example in a few minutes. There are many different techniques for root cause analysis. The is not technique, the fishbone or Ishikawa diagram, or the why technique. Most commonly referred to as the 5 why. However, sometimes you can get to the root cause of the problem in fewer whys, 3 whys. Sometimes it'll take more whys. Using the why technique, you ask why over and over again until you get to the true root cause of the problem. And how do you know you've asked why enough? Well, when asking why again doesn't add further value. So let's take our first example. The system for recording employee training and competence isn't completely effective. Supported by our evidence, we had no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. Okay, so begin asking why. Well, why was there no training matrix? Well, the first shift supervisor failed to update the training matrix as required by the first of the month. Well, why did they fail to update the matrix? Well, before the end of the previous month, the HR manager would email the training matrix template to all of the department supervisors, but this didn't happen this particular time. Well, why didn't it happen? You see, the HR manager left the company before the end of the month, and her replacement didn't email the template to all the supervisors. Well, why didn't the replacement know to email the template? Well, the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template to all of the supervisors. So you may be saying, well, why didn't the procedure for training include that requirement? And this particular problem-solving team felt we had gone far enough. We have a procedural issue here. The procedure didn't adequately address the process. And admittedly, folks, this is a gray area. How do you know if you've gone far enough? I would encourage when you're doing the why analysis to work with a team. Don't have just one person working in a vacuum. Call in all people involved in all facets of the organization that impact the process. And when you have a consensus saying, you know what, we've gone far enough, you can have much more confidence than a single person making that statement. I always share the story. I've got a 2-year-old son, and oftentimes I'll tell him no, and he'll say why, and I'll say because, and he'll say, well, why, Mama? And we'll go back and forth, and when I get to the point where I say, because I'm the mom and I said so, you can feel you've gone far enough. So when you get to that point, well, because I'm the mom and I said so, or it's just because we didn't do it, you can feel you've gone far enough. Taking a look at our second example. Document control system is not completely effective. Supported by our evidence, well, we saw the quality auditor in the blue cell using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Well, why was the quality auditor using an uncontrolled form? Well, controlled hard copies of that form had all been used up in the blue cell, so the quality auditor resorted to an older version in uncontrolled form. Why did they do this? Why didn't they just go to the system and print new copies? Well, the quality auditor in the blue cell was not aware that when no hard copies of a particular form were available, they could access them through the company's database. Why didn't they know this? Well, this blue cell auditor was not given a username and password to access the database. Why not? HR did not have a process to ensure all new hires are granted a system username and password as needed. And again, the problem-solving team felt that they had gone far enough with this example. Some of the things that we will not accept for root cause are the following: oversight, misunderstanding of the requirement. And I hesitate when I included this because in some cases we will accept misunderstanding of a requirement as a root cause. We will only accept this, though, on an initial audit or a transition audit when we're dealing with new requirements. It's possible that as you implemented your management system, you may have misinterpreted or misunderstood the requirement, and it wasn't until our auditor was on site and explained the intent of the requirement or asked questions in a certain way that the light bulb goes off. However, if that is your root cause, the only acceptable corrective action is gaining competence in that requirement, ideally through some training. I forgot, another ISO 9001 blunder, our consultant messed up, or human error. These are never acceptable. let's move to corrective action. Most important point about corrective action, and just to distinguish it from corrections, is that they should address the root cause. Remember, corrections address the symptoms of the problem. Corrective actions address the root cause. They therefore should address the question, what the system failed such that the problem occurred. Many organizations give containment actions or corrections instead of corrective actions. This is not acceptable. Not only should they address the system, but they should be irreversible. They should involve a change in the system. Retraining by itself is generally not a system change. In addition, incident-specific actions or corrections are not irreversible. In the automotive industry, corrective actions should prompt a change to your FEMAs and control plans and may require a new PPAP. Remember that the FEMAs and control plans are living documents. If you're implementing a corrective action, you should be taking credit for that in your FEMA documents and potentially lowering your risk priority number. There should be at least one corrective action for each root cause that was identified, and subsequent data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared. We're turning the problem off like a light switch. So going back to the anecdote I started earlier about the manufacturing example, we're mixing the left-hand parts and right-hand boxes and vice versa. When we reconfigured the manufacturing cell, we were still mixing the parts. So we knew we hadn't turned the problem off like a light switch. Data were not showing that the problem had 100% disappeared, so we didn't have the true root cause. So we reconvened our problem-solving team, and this time we invited a third shift material handler to our meeting. And he said something that really hit the nail on the head. Team, if it was impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and a right-hand part in a left-hand box, we wouldn't have this problem. So we hired a packaging engineer, and they made it impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and vice versa. And what do you know, if the problem 100% disappeared, we knew we had the true root cause. Let's now take a look at the two examples we've been following through. First one, the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Our corrective action, we revised section 4.6 of the procedure for training to include a requirement for the HR manager to email the template to all supervisors for updating before the end of the month. The new HR manager was trained on this added requirement, and she added an automatic reminder to Outlook to perform this task. Does this corrective action address our root cause? Let's go back to our root cause. Procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager. Was our root cause. And now our corrective action, we've now updated the procedure for training. We've done some training of the HR manager. She's added a reminder to her Outlook to perform the task. A few minutes ago I said that training is generally not good corrective action, but here the training is accompanied by a system change, a change to that procedure. In our second example, the document control system is not completely effective. Our corrective action, the new hire work instruction, has been revised to include a requirement to grant new hires the username and password as appropriate. All HR personnel were trained on the change. Does this corrective action address our root cause? Let's go back to our root cause. HR didn't have a policy to ensure all new hires are granted a system username and password. And now we've got this revision to our work instruction to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the database as they need. And then training goes along with that. But again, it's not just training. It's training accompanied by a system change. Chances are you initially did some training. Simply retraining may not be effective. moving on to preventive actions. They answer one of two questions. What other systems exist that might have the same root cause present, or what systems could I have had in place that would have prevented this from happening in the first place? Common pitfall with preventive action is that many corrective action responses will put corrective actions for preventive actions. Remember, preventive actions address the future, not the past. They're addressing what could still possibly happen, not what did happen. So preventive actions are implemented to address something that hasn't even happened yet. They address the system, not incidents, because specific incidents have not occurred. They involve changing the system to prevent future problems. A good preventive action system should identify possible preventive actions from a variety of proactive processes with inputs from multiple sources. Near-miss reports, 5S programs, walkthroughs, lean initiatives, employee suggestions, Perry Johnson Registrars, opportunity for improvements, not just because of nonconformities. In other words, no nonconformity should never mean no preventive actions. That being said, our auditors should never write you up for not having any preventive actions. However, you should be able to demonstrate to them that you've considered opportunities for preventive actions, but perhaps have made business decisions not to implement them. Those should be documented somewhere, that consideration of these opportunities and the business decision not to implement them. Failure to have that would definitely be a nonconformity. And finally, moving on to verification. This is a critical and often not performed step in the problem-solving process. Very critical final step. The issue is that many CAR forms, corrective action responses, do not have places for verification at the appropriate location. The following should be verified in a verification exercise. 1, that containment actions corrections have been taken, that proper root cause analysis has been performed, and we're able to turn the problem off, just like a light switch. Data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared through implementation of irreversible systemic corrective actions. Once these corrective actions are implemented, we should be able to remove any containment or corrections that are of the costly added layer of inspection. For example, in that manufacturing anecdote, I shared that we had operators on site at GM as well as in our facility doing 100% sort and verification of the product that was there. Once we had the true root cause and implemented the corrective action of not being able to pack left-hand parts in right-hand boxes and vice versa, we don't need this person on site doing inspection. And that this car has been forwarded as a potential preventive action opportunity as appropriate. When you do your verification, you need to understand that corrective actions, while they're meant to be irreversible, could be reversible. When you're changing a system, it means you're changing how work is performed. And change is difficult. People and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. You need to continue to verify actions even after you get positive results on the first verification. And in fact, I've read studies that you need to keep some things open as long as 18 months and continue to verify them to ensure that the corrective action continues to be implemented, systems and people aren't returning to where they feel comfortable, and the problem remains off just like a light switch. In order to promote thorough root cause analysis and systemic corrective action, PGR auditors do not accept root cause, correction, and corrective action while they're on site. Our intent is that the MR isn't working on NCR number 2 as our auditors are reading through NCR number 3 in the closing meeting. We intend that you convene a multidisciplinary problem-solving team, go through your why analysis of whatever problem-solving technique you're going to use, and implement robust corrective actions that prevent recurrence. our auditors do continue to verify the effectiveness of previous corrective actions while they're on site. In other words, when we're on surveillance audit number 3, we're going to go back and look at surveillance audit 2 nonconformities and make sure that those corrective actions are effective. I'd like to acknowledge the IAOB. They provided some of today's slide content. Now I'm going to open the floor up to questions and comments. Please type your questions into the chat feature as all of the participants are muted. Okay, getting some questions about getting copies of the slides or copies of the presentation. These will be available on our website, www.pjr.com. Someone's asking why human error is not an acceptable answer. I believe they mean root cause. If 2,000 items ship out in a year and 13 of those had oversight by QC personnel, would that not be considered human error? No, it's not human error. The intent is that you have systems in place that prevent humans from making errors. Certainly some of these can be costly. Error-proofing equipment and initiatives are very costly. So you need to weigh whether or not it's important to implement those error-proofing initiatives. However, your root cause isn't human error, it's lack of error-proofing. Someone's saying, so instead of human error, you find it relates to training of humans typically. Scott, it could relate to poor training. People make mistakes because they're not trained appropriately. Typically, poor training is lecture format and doesn't include an interactive portion where people are forced to demonstrate competence and that they understand the materials. But most commonly, when people are talking of human error, it's due to lack of error proofing. Carlos is saying why the NCs in this presentation didn't include the requirement. Carlos, if you go back in the presentation, you'll see that we clearly cited the 9001-2008 requirement that was missed. Someone's saying that root cause analysis works well in manufacturing or science-based industries. What is your experience of root cause analysis usage in sales and marketing-based companies? Arvind, it's exactly the same. Root cause analysis works well in any type of industry, manufacturing industries or any type of service industry. Mary's asking, what is the typical root cause of non-compliance under ISO 14001? Again, there isn't a typical root cause. It's going to depend on the non-conformity and the organization-specific details. Someone's asking if the class is related to ISO 17025 or only ISO 9001, ISO 9001-2008. The examples included are ISO 9001 specific, but the lessons learned are applicable to any management system standard. Fernando's saying, I think the problem with my employees is they do not know how to find the root cause. What can I do? I would be hopeful, Fernando, that this presentation would be a good step in helping employees, more specifically problem-solving teams, get to the true root cause of an issue. Dina is asking if preventive actions are considered as part of system improvement. Yes, preventive actions can be part of continual improvement initiatives. Tammy's asking, considering the difference between objective evidence and subjective evidence, how well balanced to each other do you think this should be documented? Tammy, I'm not sure I understand your question. An audit finding should cite objective evidence. If it's evidence learned through anecdote, it should be documented as such. John's asking if a gap analysis is considered preventive action. John, I know a gap analysis to be something done early in the implementation stages of a management system, where you identify what the gaps or holes are to ensure complete conformity to a particular set of requirements. I suppose the argument could be made that if you're identifying the gaps or potential holes, and you are then implementing procedures, processes to address those, that could be a preventive action. Joanna's asking about a specific NCR in her company, which we did not know we had to keep documentation for meeting. How do we document a root cause? Well, Joanna, I think you need to use the why technique. Why did you not know you need to keep documentation for a meeting? And go through the exercise of asking why over and over again using a team of people to get to the root cause. Carlos is asking if an extent analysis is always required. Yes, it's part of a complete containment response. Dina's asking, would every complaint cause someone to open up a corrective action? 100% yes. Everything that's a valid customer complaint should initiate the problem-solving process. Someone's asking an unrelated question, but he certainly will field that. John, I don't necessarily think it's important for a company's documents to be formatted the same using a common template. There's no requirement. It may be aesthetically pleasing, but no requirement to do so. Fernando's asking why corrective actions fail frequently. Corrective actions will fail if they don't address the root cause, if they're not implemented correctly, or if verification efforts are flawed. Charles is asking if there's some behavior-based root causes where someone is aware of a procedure but willfully does not follow it. Certainly those types of recalcitrant employees may exist in an organization, and at that point I think the organization needs to make a business decision about whether they're going to continue employing that person. Tammy's asking if it's a requirement to initiate a CAR for all non-conforming material. I guess that's returned from your customers. 100% yes, Tammy. Every single time you get product returned from a customer that's non-conforming, you need to start a CAR. Someone's asking a unrelated question. Where are KPIs in ISO? Are they the same as objectives? The term KPI, or Key Performance Indicator, is never mentioned in the ISO 9001 standard, but it's an industry term. In Section 4.1 of ISO 9001, you're required to define your processes, define their sequence and interaction, and monitor and measure those processes. All this is stated in 4.1. KPIs are one tool to monitor or measure processes, and a KPI is going to be an objective with a target. We want to decrease PPM by 5% from last year's values, and that would be an example of a KPI that's measurable, or an all-or-nothing KPI. We want to complete all planned internal audits. Either you did or you didn't. Linda's sharing a particular example in her company, assembly situation, where corrective action stem from people being placed into areas they aren't familiar with. It appears management wants to make the root cause training, but it seems to stem from supervisor management decisions to move people quickly to make production numbers. How can that be addressed in a corrective action? Certainly, Linda, your corrective action team should include supervisors and management. And perhaps you could show how non-conforming product and the cost associated with that product, sometimes numbers speak volumes. If you could show the cost savings in making that initial investment in training so that competent people can be placed, perhaps they'll see the return on investment. Someone is saying cause analysis is only for corrective actions. Miguel, root cause analysis and corrective actions are directly linked. Corrective actions remove the cause of the problem. This is different than corrections, which address the symptoms of a problem. Getting a lot of questions, and I'm surprised. If you find a nonconformance in your company, do you need to make a CAR for it? Or only when an auditor finds a nonconformance? Folks, please take a look at 852. Whenever a nonconformity is uncovered, either by a customer, an auditor, an internal auditor, an employee in your organization, you have to initiate a CAR. Getting a lot of requests about suggesting a good root cause for a particular example. I'm not in a position to suggest or propose possible root causes or solutions. It's important that you convene the team, make sure everybody who touches the product is involved with the process, is part of that team, and you go through the why analysis. Lauren's bringing up an example where she's getting a repeat of a problem, which means probably haven't found the true root cause, Lauren. The problem relates to QC paperwork not being filled out properly. You may want to look at the format of that paperwork. Is it filled out longhand? Is it filled out electronically? Maybe if it was filled out electronically and if a field was skipped or not addressed appropriately, the computer would flash a warning and not allow the person to proceed. And I've just suggested something specific, but I was able to do so with the level of detail you provided. Someone's saying, how do you approach solving problems if your method of analysis is different from your customers and hence different results for the same measurement? I'm assuming this relates to verification of the product. You use one measurement technique and get a set of results. They use a different measurement technique and get a different measurement result, and they're saying that the product was non-conforming. It's important to see in the customer contract if they're flowing down a specific measurement technique that should be used, and you should then be using that measurement technique, and those discrepancies would be avoided. Angelic's asking, if you're finding nonconformities and issuing cars for them, are you setting yourself up for getting written up by a third-party auditor if they don't agree that your cars are effective? I guess, Angelica, you're also setting yourself up if you aren't writing cars. The intent is that you document cars for every nonconforming situation and take sound root cause and implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence of those issues. When you do that, and do it over a long period of time, there'll be fewer and fewer issues for which you have to initiate cars. Yes, Angelica, the auditors will ask for cars as part of their audit of 852. Carlos is asking how you can get the PGR advisories. Carlos, the intended audience is our auditors. If any are specific to our client base, they'll be available on the clients only portion of the website. You can access our website to sign up for clients only. Right now there's no more questions. I'll hang out for just a moment or two more to see if any questions come in. While we're waiting, copies of this presentation will be available on our website for download, www.pjr.com. In addition, you'll be able to access slides and digital recordings of previous webinars and get information on upcoming webinars. Yes, Donald, if items are reviewed under an MRB system, that fulfills the CAR requirement. Chris is asking, what triggers a preventive action without a nonconformity? Chris, we had a slide that addressed that. Perhaps somebody's doing a safety walkthrough and they notice something that could lead to initiation of a preventive action. Maybe lean initiatives such as 5S audits. That could also lead to initiation of a preventive action, an opportunity for improvement suggested by a Perry Johnson auditor, a customer suggestion when they're verifying one of your processes. All of those are examples. Chris, I'm sorry, I can't answer what percentage of corrective actions would result in a preventive action. What I can say is that every corrective action should be considered for preventive action. Brian, lack of communication could be a root cause analysis, yes. Don't know the specific instance, but yes, that's a possibility. In the time remaining, I can certainly address questions outside this presentation about any management system topics. We've got a few minutes left. Great question. What types of records would you expect for preventive actions? Again, look at 853. You're attempted to document what the preventive action is. You're required to document, I've actually got to pull my standard here. You're required to bear with me. You're required to document the nonconformity and its potential cause, what action you're going to take, and the results of the action taken. Did it work? Did it seem to prevent improvement? And that of course would be the effectiveness. Clifford, I just want to be really clear about this topic of human error. Since all nonconformants should have an NCR and human error is not allowed, can any organization be 100% human error free? I want to make myself perfectly clear. I'm not saying that humans don't make mistakes and that there is not human error in an organization. Of course there is. What I'm saying is that human error cannot be the root cause. The root cause, whenever you're thinking of writing those two words, human error, in the root cause box on your corrective action form, that's not the root cause. The cause is that you've got a system that's allowing humans to make mistakes. That's the true root cause. You've got a system that isn't error-proof or mistake-proofed. The question is whether or not you're going to implement the error-proofing initiatives needed to prevent human error in that particular process. These are costly, and you've got to make that business decision. I hope that that's clear. Got about 1 more minute, folks, for any final questions. I'm getting a question from Clifford. Should a simple human error result in an NCR? If the human error leads to a non-conforming situation, yes. Okay, folks, it looks like those are all the questions we're going to get. I thank you for taking the time to attend today. Before this U.S. holiday, I know this Wednesday tends to be very busy for folks trying to get things finished up before the long weekend. We appreciate your attendance and hope you found the content of today's presentation helpful. Thank you. Goodbye. Part of that team, and you go through the why analysis. Lauren's bringing up an example where she's getting a repeat of a problem, which means probably haven't found the true root cause, Lauren. The problem relates to QC paperwork not being filled out properly. You may want to look at the format of that paperwork. Is it filled out longhand? Is it filled out electronically? Maybe if it was filled out electronically and if a field was skipped or not addressed appropriately, the computer would flash a warning and not allow the person to proceed. And I've just suggested something specific, but I was able to do so with the level of detail you provided. Someone's saying, how do you approach solving problems if your method of analysis is different from your customers and hence different results for the same measurement? I'm assuming this relates to verification of the product. You use one measurement technique and get a set of results. They use a different measurement technique and get a different measurement result, and they're saying that the product was non-conforming. It's important to see in the customer contract if they're flowing down a specific measurement technique that should be used, and you should then be using that measurement technique, and those discrepancies would be avoided. Angelic's asking, if you're finding nonconformities and issuing cars for them, are you setting yourself up for getting written up by a third-party auditor if they don't agree that your cars are effective? I guess, Angelica, you're also setting yourself up if you aren't writing cars. The intent is that you document cars for every non-conforming situation and take sound root cause and implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence of those issues. When you do that and do it over a long period of time, there'll be fewer and fewer issues for which you have to initiate cars. Yes, Angelica, the auditors will ask for cars as part of their audit of 852. Carlos is asking how you can get the PGR advisories. Carlos, the intended audience is our auditors. If any are specific to our client base, they'll be available on the clients only portion of the website. You can access our website to sign up for clients only. Right now there's no more questions. I'll hang out for just a moment or two more to see if any questions come in. While we're waiting, copies of this presentation will be available on our website for download, www.pjr.com. In addition, you'll be able to access slides and digital recordings of previous webinars and get information on upcoming webinars. Yes, Donald, if items are reviewed under an MRB system, that fulfills the CAR requirement. Chris is asking, what triggers a preventive action without a nonconformity? Chris, we had a slide that addressed that. Perhaps somebody's doing a safety walkthrough and they notice something that could lead to initiation of a preventive action. Maybe lean initiatives such as 5S audits. That could also lead to initiation of a preventive action, an opportunity for improvement suggested by a Perry Johnson auditor, a customer suggestion when they're verifying one of your processes. All of those are examples. First, I'm sorry, I can't answer what percentage of corrective actions would result in a preventive action. What I can say is that every corrective action should be considered for preventive action. Brian, lack of communication could be a root cause analysis, yes. Don't know the specific instance, but yes, that's a possibility. In the time remaining, I can certainly address questions outside this presentation about any management system topics. We've got a few minutes left. Great question. What types of records would you expect for preventive actions? Again, look at 853. You're attempted to document what the preventive action is. You're required to document, I've actually got to pull my standard here. You're required to bear with me. You're required to document the nonconformity and its potential cause, what action you're going to take, and the results of the action taken. Did it work? Did it seem to prevent improvement? And that of course would be the effectiveness. Clifford, I just want to be really clear about this topic of human error. Since all nonconformants should have an NCR and human error is not allowed, can any organization be 100% human error free? I want to make myself perfectly clear. I'm not saying that humans don't make mistakes and that there is not human error in an organization. Of course there is. What I'm saying is that human error cannot be the root cause. The root cause, whenever you're thinking of writing those two words, human error, in the root cause box on your corrective action form, that's not the root cause. The cause is that you've got a system that's allowing humans to make mistakes. That's the true root cause. You've got a system that isn't error-proof or mistake-proofed. The question is whether or not you're going to implement the error-proofing initiatives needed to prevent human error in that particular process. These are costly, and you've got to make that business decision. I hope that that's clear. Got about 1 more minute, folks, for any final questions. Getting a question from Clifford, should a simple human error result in an NCR? If the human error leads to a non-conforming situation, yes. Okay, folks, it looks like those are all the questions we're going to get. I thank you for taking the time to attend today. Before this U.S. holiday, I know this Wednesday tends to be very busy for folks trying to get things finished up before the long weekend. We appreciate your attendance and hope you found the content of today's presentation helpful. Thank you.